Google squaring off against the Department of Justice in the biggest antitrust lawsuit against a tech giant in over 20 years, as the U.S. government looks to back its claims that Google is monopolizing its power to overtake the search engine space. In opening statements yesterday, the DOJ's lawyer said, quote, "This case is about the future of the internet and whether Google's search engine will ever face meaningful competition." Our next guest argues that the outcome of this trial could seriously impact other dominant forces in the space as well. Bill Baer, former Assistant Attorney General of the Antitrust Division and former Director of the Bureau of Competition, is joining us now. Thanks for being here. So I guess let's start there. What are the bigger implications of this case here?
Well, good morning. The implications really are huge. We have seen over the course of the last 15 or 20 years, internet platforms, not just Google, but Amazon, Apple, Meta, Facebook, become dominant in the segment of the market in which they operate. And that dominance seems to persist. And the question is whether or not these companies, Google included, have systematically done things to injure their rivals, prevent consumers from having meaningful choice. That's really what this case against Google that began yesterday is all about.
I mean, part of this, too, is the fact that for, basically a decade and more, they had retained the top spot at this kind of ad marketing or digital ad marketing duopoly, made possible by some very strategic acquisitions. And DoubleClick is one that largely gets thrown into that conversation. So in the ramifications of this case, is it likely at all that they'll be forced to unwind any of the acquisitions or make some of their technology that they own available to others out there?
Depends on what the judge finds. If he finds that Google misbehaved, that it limited its rivals' opportunity, that it became a monopolist not only on the consumer-facing side of the platform, where we look to do our queries, but also in terms of dominating the ad space and being able to charge super competitive prices to people who want to advertise on Google as the only meaningful game in town. If the judge finds that's a problem, he can do a bunch of things. He can restrict what Google is allowed to do in the future. It could force Google to divest lines of business. We won't know about remedy until we find out whether the judge agrees this is a monopolist that is behaving badly.
What's interesting is a lot of folks have drawn the parallel with Microsoft, of course, and harkened back to that case. There are some who would argue that that case ended up being more positive for Microsoft in the long run, that it went on to be a stronger business as a result of the government case against it. When we look at Google here, are there any parallels we can draw on that front?
Well, we do know that Microsoft, after that case that began 25 years ago and was resolved in 2001, became much more antitrust sensitive, much more careful about what it did and how it did it. And it's certainly possible that Google, if found liable, will have learned that lesson. One lesson the government says they learned is a bad one. That is, they instructed businessmen not to use certain terms in their internal communications, internal documents. They set up a chat room where you could have off-the-record communications between Google employees that auto-deleted after 24 hours. And so what the government says is they actually artificially manipulated the business environment to disguise the competitive significance of what they are doing. So positive lessons, maybe negative lessons learned from Microsoft.
How much forward or kind of cutting edge technology is likely to come up in this case too? I mean, when we talk about the future of the internet, like the internet has already been out there. It's been secure. It's been kind of solidified as part of our day in, day out processes and so many different facets of life. But now the next wave is so focused on technology like generative AI. How much of that is expected to come up within this trial?
I think the government's case is going to be two-sided in that it's going to say there was bad behavior in the past that enabled Google to be a monopolist. but also they are going to have a leg up when it comes to generative AI because they have so much data about those of us who use Google for search. They're going to be able to use that information to secure dominant position when it comes to generative AI as well. So this case is backward looking in terms of what behaviors Google engaged in the last 10 or 15 years, but it's also forward looking in terms of what is the significance for us as consumers if Google becomes the only game in town.
Bill, really great insights, and really pleasure to have you here on the show with us to help us break this down. Bill Baer, who is the former Assistant Attorney General of the Antitrust Division of the U.S. Department of Justice. Thanks so much.
Thank you.